feet of the chain run. And how do you do that? First 6 seconds, point A to point B, everything you got. Everything you got. Turn that shit up. Let's go.
Welcome to the Scoop World Order. It is Wednesday. We have a long physical practice today for the Buckeyes as they get ready for the Toledo Rockets. We are 2-0. The Bucks got a lot of things they got to get better at, but we are still 2-0. So at the end of the day, that is great for our team and for our vibe. This is going to be a nice little challenge with Toledo, a team that I think could beat maybe half the teams in the Big Ten on a given day. Especially the lower, 6 or 7 teams. I think they could give them a good run for their money. So our boys better be sharp and ready to rock. So this will be a good challenge before we welcome the Wisconsin Badgers, who will be here for a night game the following Saturday. The Horseshoe will be rocking. So as always, we are thankful for you guys. We are very grateful for you guys. Thank you guys for everything you do. We are growing like crazy. We appreciate you guys. Please leave us a like and subscribe to the channel. We would love to know what do you guys want to see us improve on this week versus last week? Is it the interior running game? Is it production from our defensive ends who've yet to get a sack despite their gaudy recruiting rankings and significant pressure? They have not gotten home yet. What do you want to see us improve on? Write that below in the comments. As always, we appreciate every comment. I read every comment. I love your feedback. I appreciate you guys as always. With that being said, I'm going to bring in my good friend, Nevada Buck. Nevada, how are you?
I'm doing great. Getting excited. It's getting towards the middle of the week and getting towards the backside towards football's coming back again. So I'm always excited. It's when during football season. So this is it's a good day. It's a good day for the Buckeyes. A nice solid day of practice and getting ready for the Toledo game.
Yeah, I'm really excited. There was a lot that went on today with Ryan Day and Jim Knowles both met with the media. CJ Stroud, he's meeting with the media for 15, 20 minutes, almost as long as the coach and the coordinators there, it's amazing. But Ryan, he mentioned some things about some guys that have been productive. A guy that he brought up that he really loved was Cade Stover. He said Cade has been a force. He actually ran a wheel route last week, which I've never seen in the history of Ohio State football. We threw a wheel route to a tight end. And I think Cade is one of the guys who is one of the most athletic guys on the team, but he just doesn't look it, because he's like a big country farm boy with a crew cut, and he's a big farmer dude. But the dude can run, and his routes are actually really crisp. And I talked to someone inside the Woody Hayes, and he's a better route runner than Jeremy Ruckert, which was stunning because pretty much everybody thinks Jeremy Ruckert was one of the most athletic, best route running tight ends we've ever had. But it turns out, my guy in the Woody Hayes said, he's got a few highlight reel catches, but as a whole, he likes Cade better. More physical as a blocker. He's actually faster, and his routes are crisper. So, Nevada, your thoughts on Cade Stover? He's a captain this year, starting tight end. What has his impact been to the offense thus far through 2 games?
Well, I mean, Cade's impact obviously goes beyond play on the field. This guy is a leader. He's a leader in the weight room. He's a leader in the film room. He's a leader on and off the field. He just such a great example. And, one of the examples of leadership that I saw from Cade that really kind of caught my eye and really made an impact on me was when Cade and Tommy Eichenberg went to Coach Day during the offseason and said they wanted the condition to be tougher. They wanted Coach Mick to be tougher on the team. They didn't feel they were tough enough on him last year. And Cade asked for the strength and conditioning program to be amped up. And that's rare when you see that coming from the players when they're asking for things to be harder. But Cade did that. Cade led that charge. Cade, led like a captain does. And regardless of his production in the field, I think his impact in the team is going to be felt considerably on both sides of the ball, and he's just everything you want in an Ohio State football player. And like I said, great blocker, tough kid, and very very capable receiver. So he really checks all the boxes.
Yeah, and I thought that was something that needed to be said and needed to be done. And there's been talk about how we've become more of a national, softer 7-on-7 type of team, and Cade's a local Ohio kid from Lexington. He's a tough kid. He's more of kind of a throwback Jim Tressel type of recruit in terms of the mentality and the toughness. And, I think, the thing that, people don't see is you really need a hard off season to get a team ready to go and harden up and ready for camp and for the season. And, And the thing that really makes your offseason conditioning even more imperative is the fact that you don't practice nearly as much as you used to. Like, we don't do 2-a-days anymore. We have 1-a-days and limited time on the field. So, back, I'm just saying, it wasn't that long ago. I say back in the olden days, 15 years ago, like when I was playing, we had 2-a-days every other day. My freshman year, we had 2 days every day. And then, they just gradually ramped it back to the point where there's less contact, there's less time on the field, more walkthroughs, more meetings. And so you really have to make up for that somewhere, and it has to be in the weight room, and it has to be out on the field during summer conditioning, because you're not going to get as many physical reps during camp to get you in shape. So you better be in, I guess, even better shape before you report to camp. And when we reported to camp, we generally are always in good shape, because the first day of camp under Jim Tressel, we had to run the conditioning test, which was literally the most miserable day of the entire year, especially for big guys, because it was 20 half gassers at 5:30 in the morning at the Horseshoe, under the lights. Like, it was terrible. I mean, the worst day of the year. You could feel it, counting down, days counting down, like, oh God, I got 5 more days till the conditioning test. So, you're eating grilled chicken and spinach, and you're not having, that extra tall boy at dinner or whatever, and, drinking water and Gatorade and stuff that you don't like to do. And all of a sudden, that thing hits, and it was always a miserable day. But I really like what Kay did. What else, Nevada, do you want to see going forward this week? Ryan mentioned that we potentially could see Jackson Smith and Jigba. I'll believe that when I see it. Julian Fleming, I'll believe that when I see it. I think that there's no advantage schematically when you're going against a team like Toledo, who's a good team, to tell them that Jackson Smith and Jigba is not playing. But I think he'll be very limited, I'd imagine, given it is a MAC school, and we should. You just got to beat him by 1 point. You should be able to do that with Marvin Harrison and Emeka and Jaden Ballard. But what do you want to see this week? What do you project to see out of Julian and Jackson Smith and the rest of the guys?
Well, it's so hard to say with those guys that are injured, because those generally they come down to game time decisions and how are they feeling, and if there's even like a twinge in a hamstring or a lower body or upper body injury, the coaching staff's going to hold those guys out. So no telling on that. As for what I want to see, we've been talking a lot about the offensive line and about how important that unit is to the success of the team. And we had the helping technician, who's one of our great insiders, break down what he felt was the strengths and weaknesses on the offensive line, and he pointed to a couple things that I hadn't really noticed as much, but after spending some time looking at the film, I tend to agree with him. And he identified 2 of our offensive linemen that, in his opinion, needed to pick up their play, needed to be a little bit better in order for Ohio State to meet their ultimate goals. And he identified those being DeJuan Jones at the right tackle spot and Donovan Jackson at the left guard spot. And he talked about, DeJuan, playing a little bit inconsistently, playing on some plays like an All-American, high NFL draft pick, and then other plays just, out to lunch. We've seen the procedure penalties when we're running tempo. We've seen some other, missed assignments. And, again, with Donovan Jackson, we saw that he had a pretty tough game against Notre Dame, and really struggled in run and in pass protection, blew some assignments. And so I guess what I'd be looking for is a little bit more cohesion out of that unit. Maybe watch those particular 2 guys to step up a little bit, play a little bit better, play with a little bit more consistency, and see if that unit can become the dominating offensive line unit that everybody projected it would be, and frankly what Ohio State needs it to be in order for us to win the national championship.
Yeah, and I think that Donnie is a kid. He's a second-year sophomore. He played tackle in high school. He played guard and tight end last year for us, kind of in spot duty. He wore the number 41 jersey like Josh Fryer does this year, as like kind of a spot unbalanced, which is unbalanced means an extra kind of offensive lineman in their tight end number. But he's only a true sophomore. He's only through 2 starts, so I knew there'd be some growing pains, and sure as can be, like the second play of the game against Notre Dame, he gives up a sack. So like I said, I've been there, and when you're a high school tackle and you're learning guard, it's a lot like Paris Johnson last year, and even Thayer to a degree, who was a 5th-year guy. He never really played guard before. They'd been tackles their whole lives. They had to slide in there. It's a different world. Again, you could be a really good offensive lineman, but it's like if you are a really good center in the NBA, and then you have to play shooting guard. It's a whole different world. You know, you're still playing basketball, but it's a different world. But I think Donnie, he's a guy that, you know, obviously he needs to get better, but I think he should progress as he gets more experience. I was in the same shoes, first few games when I was a redshirt freshman, which is the same age as being a true sophomore. It took me a little bit of time, but by the end of the year in 04, I was really playing well, and I didn't even get. I mean, it was funny because in 04 when I played tackle, I gave up a sack. I gave up 0 sacks. It was the only year I didn't give up a sacks, and I was like, man, this is easy, and it was probably the best defensive ends ever won against too. So, but I think DeWand is going to be a really tough eval for NFL draft for GMs, scouts, because his talent is outerworldly. He's got A+ size. He's really nimble, but he's a kid that has to really lock in and focus on his technique. And his technique has come a long way, but he gets tired, he gets inconsistent. He lets guys that really shouldn't overpower him. He got put on his butt, a couple times, and he got bull rush a couple times. Like guys that should never be able to bull rush a guy that big and strong. And it's because his footwork is just wackadoo sometimes. He'll take a good crisp set, then he'll take one where his feet are just kind of all over the place, and he's just I think it's because he's tired. And it's when you're that big and and you're carrying 350. I mean, it's hard to always be full of gas, and not with the tank on E. So it's gonna be interesting to see how DeWand picks it up. I think that we got to keep running the ball to help him out a little bit because he's a good pass blocker. But when you're that big, run blocking is always going to be your forte. Going forward defensively, we heard from Jim Knowles today. Obviously, he's had an incredible impact. One of the things he mentioned in his press conference today was the lack of playing time for CJ Hicks, and that was a guy that me and you were both projecting would get into the game last week. He did not for any significant amount of time. What is the downside to kind of the short rotation in your mind that Jim Knowles plays? He generally plays 5 or 6 DBs. During the time when the game is still, in doubt, like when the game's still close. So when we empty the bench, I mean, obviously he's going to go up to 10, 15 different guys in the back 7. But what are your thoughts on the shorter rotation that Jim Knowles seems to employ compared to past defensive coordinators?
Well, again, I think it's really a fundamental core value for Jim that guys earn playing time, that that there's responsibility that comes with having playing time, that when you blow assignments that there's repercussions when that happens. And so I think it's basically who Jim Knowles is. So I think as an Ohio State fan, we've just got to get used to it. And I think that means guys that we might have thought we'd see, like Sonny Styles or CJ Hicks or Kai Stokes, just aren't getting in there, when the bullets are still flying around. And we still have to remember, though, that the Ohio State defense is really still fully implementing their defensive plan. So these guys need these reps because there's nothing like replicating. You can have all the practice you want, you can have all the scrimmages you want. There's nothing like game reps to kind of help you kind of fully implement a defense. And we need it to be fully implemented come Big Ten time, and he doesn't have a lot of time to do it. He doesn't have, he's got one player, Tanner McAllister, who's had any experience in this defensive set before, and so I think he's got a lot to do. And the one of the casualties of that is a long rotation. So I think these young guys are just going to have to be patient, wait for their time, and when they get their time, they're just going to have to make the most of it, like Josh Proctor did. Josh Proctor got pulled, came back strong against Arkansas State. Had one of the highest ranked games he's ever had at Ohio State, and he was truly outstanding. On just about every play, every facet of the game, and I think that's the kind of production that we're going to need from our veterans as this new defense gets implemented.
And on the subject of someone getting the hook, getting pulled in somewhat of an embarrassing fashion, do you think that Denzel Burke, our star corner, who has had a little bit of a rough patch to start the season, potentially can have a bounce back the way Josh Proctor did after getting benched week 1 and then being one of the highest graded out players on the defense in week 2?
Well, I do. I expect it. I think it's going to happen that way. I think Denzel's a really proud kid. He's I think it's very easy when things start to go bad that they start to snowball on you. You've got a little bit of a nagging injury that starts to bother you. Things start distracting you, and things can go wrong in a hurry. And I fully expect him to come back and have a great game, not just a good game. I expect he's going to have a great game on Saturday. And, I think it kind of humbled him. It humbled him a little bit. He certainly talked about that to some of his close friends on the team and talked about how it was kind of a humbling experience to have that happen. Hadn't been embarrassed like that in quite some time since Pee Wee football. And I think we're going to see a different Denzel Burke come out there against Toledo on Saturday night.
Yeah, and as a former player, there's nothing more embarrassing than getting yanked as a starter and having them have to put someone else to do your job. That is about as bad as it gets in front of 105,000 people, and you have millions watching, and all the naysayers across social media. It's a pretty rough deal when you get yanked. But when you play a position where you're out there like corner or tackle or receive, somewhere where the spotlight's on you, you drop a ball, you give up a sack. You give up a couple of passes, you get a defensive pass interference. Like, the whole world sees that. They can't hide that. And it's not, some positions are easier to hide it, like a defensive tackle. If we're not getting it done, like against Michigan, where our tackles really played poorly, people don't really know that as well. It's not, you're kind of in that big cluster in the middle, and they can't tell who's getting waxed and pushed around. And, there's some spots where the whole world can see a quarterback, cornerback, and there's some where it's a little bit more mucked up. Our defensive ends have yet to record a sack, which is maybe one of the most stunning statistics of the season. Mike Hall's had numerous, and we've gotten pressure up the middle. JT actually, through the advanced analytics, has one of the highest pass rush win rates in the country, but he hasn't gotten home yet. And Jack Sawyer has been getting real close. Nevada, is that an issue to you going forward, the fact that we don't have any sacks out of our 2 5-star defensive ends? And do we get a sack this week? And if so, who gets our first sack out of the defensive ends in the 2022 season?
I would say it's going to be Jack Sawyer. And, I think little things like that, is it an issue? Yeah, I think it's an issue. I think it's definitely something. But, as you said, we're getting close, and, in years gone by when we've had trouble generating the pressure, we just weren't even, being able to pressure the quarterback or move the pocket with 4. And we had to blitz to even get the guy off his mark. And that's when you really have a problem. When you have to blitz to get any kind of pressure on the quarterback, then you're going to be in for some long days on the defensive backfield. But, we're getting there. We're just not getting there quite quickly enough. We're allowing the defensive tackles to run free. We're showing some interesting things from the double A gap blitzes and some of the other things we're doing. But I'm not worried about it. I think we break out this week, and we do we'll break out in a hurry, and I think we'll get them in bunches. But no, JT and Sawyer have both been getting there with regularity. There's just been just a beat slow, but they forced an awful lot of plays. They've assisted on an awful lot of tackles, and I don't like the way they play. I'm loving the way they're playing right now, and I think it's really one of the keys for the entire defense.
Yeah, I think both those ends are really kicking butt up front. I think that they're both physical. They're tough to go against. They've been great against the run. I think Jack playing the Leo Jack position, where he's kind of playing like that middle linebacker and walks around, is incredibly difficult to go against if you're an offensive line, especially in the horseshoe where it's loud and you can't communicate, you can't change your calls, and he walks around and switches gaps. That is miserable to go against. So, I think that it's not going to be an issue going forward. I think our guys are going to get home this weekend. But I think that, Oklahoma State had 57 sacks last year. So my bold prediction preseason, we'd have 50. Looks like we might be a little short as we get going. But I think part of it with Ohio State versus Oklahoma State is, teams know that they got to get rid of the ball fast. So, Arkansas State, they're holding that ball for about 2 seconds and it was gone because they knew that their tackles couldn't hold up against these guys. So I always kind of put that as like an advanced kind of measure when you're accounting for the fact they're not getting home, is because these guys, they know their guys can't block these guys. So they know well ahead of time that they can't hold the ball. Where I think with like an Oklahoma State, you would go into a lot of those games thinking, they don't have a Jack Sawyer, they don't have a JT Tumalo, they don't have Mike Hall. So it's like, we can hang on to the ball, and then those guys end up getting home because they underestimate them and they move around a lot. So with that being said, Nevada, we're through 2 days of practice. Any projections going into Toledo early on? Obviously, we can revisit these over the next few days, but any projections you have going into this game? Do you have any type of nerves going into this game, or you feel like this will be another 45-12 type blowout?
Well, I mean, I guess it just depends on what you determine to be a blowout. I guess with the odds makers saying these games, I don't think this game's going to be a blowout. I think it's going to be a Super Bowl for Toledo. I think it's going to be a close game. You know, relatively speaking, close being under 30 points. You know, I could see Ohio State winning 42-14 or something like that, and you know, but I don't think it's going to be a blood. It's not going to be 70-0. I can tell you that. Toledo's too good. Anybody walking into that game expecting it to be that way is going to be very disappointed. Toledo's a good football team, well coached, got a lot of good players, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And I think I can see this game being close. Like all these in-state games, in-state rivals, there's always that game that turns out to be a little bit closer than you want it to be. I think this is that game for Ohio State, and you know, do I think they could lose the game? No, I can't conceive of a way that they can lose. But I'm sure Texas A&M never thought that they could lose to Appalachian State either, and so I think Ohio State's got to come ready to play. But I'm saying it's going to be a closer game than the odds makers say, and maybe most Ohio State fans think it'll be.
Do you think, and this is the last question, do you think it being a night game is a bigger benefit for Ohio State or for Toledo?
I think it's a bigger benefit for Toledo. I think for those guys, you know, I mean, think about Toledo. How many times does Toledo get a chance to play on like at night against, you know, a number 1, 2, or 3 ranked team in the country? And I just feel like they'll have, you know, all eyes are on them. This is really just kind of a, you know, for Ohio State, yeah, it's another night game. I mean, I'm not sure how many night games Ohio State's going to have this year, but you know, 4 or 5 or whatever it's going to be. But for Toledo, I think this is a really big deal, and it made a really big deal even bigger. And you know, I think anything that where Ohio State's got a little bit of a different schedule, it's a little bit later in the day, they get a chance to be a little bit more lackadaisical. You know, it could help. Now, again, having said that, if it was a noon game, I'd probably be saying it was a sleepy noon game. So maybe 3:30 is the sweet spot for Ohio State. But I think Toledo is going to be playing hard, and I think that night games is going to get them extra jacked up as well.
Yeah, and I think if you're a player on Ohio State or a coach, they'll never say this, you know, to outside media or whatever, but it's an annoyance when you get a MAC game scheduled as a night game because, you know, you think you're going to beat them by a significant amount. You want to get that game over with. You got Wisconsin coming here next week, and it's like you want to get on to Wisconsin as fast as possible. So ideally, you'd get this thing done. You'd be done by 3:30 Saturday, flush it down the tubes, and it's on to, you know, the big bad, you know, Badgers. But, you know, you got to kind of lay around in that hotel all day, and you got to go over to the Woody and do a bunch of walkthroughs and extra treatment. And, you know, those night games are not fun, especially when it's a team like Toledo. You know, Notre Dame's one thing. You know, I played in the 05 Texas game. That was a huge night game. That was a big deal. But, you know, I think it's more of an annoyance, and I think you're really spot on the Toledo thing. So with that being said, man, I'm going to wrap this thing up. This was a great one, as always. Thank you, Nevada. Appreciate you, my man. So with that being said, we're going to wrap this show up. We appreciate you guys, as always. Thank you, Scoop family. I want to know, who do you believe will get the biggest bump in playing time this weekend? That's another thing to comment on. I think that, you know, is it going to be Denzel? Is he going to get a spot back? Is he going to play well? Is it going to be JT? Is it going to be Jack? Who gets the first sack at defensive end? That's a great question for you guys. I'd love to hear your input on that. So please give me your feedback. Love to hear from you guys. I hope you guys are doing great. Appreciate you guys as always. Click subscribe, spread the news. We're growing like crazy, all because of you. So thank you so much, Buckeye Nation. Thank you, Scoop family. Appreciate you guys. And I wish you guys the best. I hope you guys have a great day. Talk to you guys tomorrow. Go Bucks.